Greetings. Welcome to Lesson 2 of Modular 2, which is on the BABH 9804 course. This one particular on business impact analysis. In Lesson 1, we've introduced the three components of the business contingency plan process: vulnerability analysis, impact analysis, and the crisis plan. In this lesson, we'll concentrate on the business impact analysis. The definition: business impact analysis predicts the consequences of the disruption of a business function and process and gathers information needed to develop recovery strategies. The potential loss scenarios should be identified for the use in the business continuity plan. What a BIA does: it evaluates the impact of a given potential crisis, identifies the resources, functions, and timeframes that need to be prioritized to restore normal business following a disruption. It assists in formulating realistic business recovery strategies, and it limits potential losses. There are three basic stages to a BIA. First of all, you have to gather all the information. Then you're going to have to analyze that information and, of course, report on that. The steps are, well, they seem simple. It's 7 steps in all. You identify the key business processes and functions. You establish the requirement for the business recovery. You determine the resources, the interdependencies that you have and you determine the impact on the operation. You develop priorities and classifications of business processes and functions, and then you develop recovery time requirements. This follows with a financial, operational, and legal impact analysis of the disruption. But is a crucially important phase of the process, leading to the complete understanding of the situation, so that a business continuity plan can be formulated with a full knowledge and understanding of the scenario under investigation. You will be required to complete a subjected summary version of the BIA for the business continuity plan project in this course. Every business department has a purpose to process, create, and serve to meet the overall business objective. Each department has a series of sub-processes that serve to facilitate the functions needed to meet these objectives. Let's take an example of the front desk operation. The purpose of the front desk operation is to serve guests with check-in, check-out, reservations, and information. These processes will require tools and assets for information technology, human resources, communications, and physical assets and suppliers. To complete this further, business departments depend on other business departments. Again, the front desk example. The front desk department relies on housekeeping and maintenance, food and beverage, reservations, and the IT department. So a failure in any one of these departments will affect the efficiency and effectiveness of the front desk operation. Therefore, a BIA investigating the front desk department will not only have to consider the needs of their own area, but must recognize the sub-processes too. For a complete BIA, the complexity is magnified. Therefore, all business departments must be considered, with their relationships to all other departments, determining how they impact on the crisis. What are metrics? Are measurements. So basically we're looking for the measurements for recovery. The recovery of a normal operation of a business is the principal objective of the business continuity contingency plan. In order to recognize the success of the plan, the BIA will be required to determine a definition of what that normal operation should be. And when, after the crisis, will it be reached? For this reason, each process investigated will be required to determine the RTO, RPO pertinent to the operation. So what's an RTO and RPO? Well, it's logical. RTO is the recovery time objective that the process would have. How much time an operation can be down and still avoid unacceptable consequences. On the other side, the RPO is the recovery point objective. What is the level of output or service that would be considered acceptable after recovery? Look at it this way. There are various levels of RPOs depending on what the recovery time objective is asked for. If 100% of normal capacity is acceptable in 7 days, perhaps a 50% of the capacity in 3 days and 25% in 24 hours is a good sequence of the objectives. Another metric could be considered the maximum tolerable period of disruption, MTPD. At what point will the disruption not be recoverable? The maximum time that the key products or services can be available or unavailable or undeliverable before stakeholders perceive unacceptable consequences. Or in other words, at what level of impact will the decision be there is nothing to recover? We have to start over. The information gathering is a critical element. It's all very subjective, and it's really gathering information about the processes and the consequences of the disruption on those processes. And you're going to do this by literally 4 different ways. Questionnaires that you will send to all department heads and managers and personnel involved with that particular process. A workshop that would probably be in the order of announcing what the process is all about, demonstrating what the questionnaires and the interviews are going to be asking, getting people to think about what the consequences of an impact of disruption would be. Okay, and then of course individual interviews and research of reference materials, in which the department is all part of. You'll probably be looking at their organizational structure. You'll be looking at some of their history of growth. You'll be looking at how the operation works. All tools must be customized for each crisis situation. And that's very important, because once you realize that every sort of operation you're looking at is going to be slightly different. The crisis you might be looking at might be across the board for the entire organization, but the investigation in each of the departments will have to be handled on a customized basis. Well, before you even start that, you should get an overview. Prior to the design of each of these tools, it's suggested that you review the organizational chart, you determine statistical and interview strategies for all the operations of the business, you interview department heads and managers to determine the activity interdependencies for other or with other units and suppliers, etc. The data collected is done so that a single operation is in mind. Each operation has a process and a sub-process. The BIA will be executed for all the operations, and if we look at the front desk operations, all processes in its domain include reservation check-in and out, room availability, billing, emergency measures, etc. But most of the processes will rely on information and communication with other operations. Therefore, crises in other operations can cause crises in the front desk operations. The tools used, such as the questionnaires and interviews, etc., are structured so that the comparison of the results can be made across all the processor operations. In other words, since a single questionnaire is used in all operations, the results can be compared, ranked, and formally analyzed to highlight the areas that would have the most severe impact and therefore require greatest attention to attain recovery. Let's look at an example of a questionnaire from Loyola College in the States. The readings give a 10-page example of a BIA questionnaire used by the university, specifically for information technology operations. We'll spend a few minutes reviewing the document to point out the features and the advantages of the format. I've done this on a YouTube. It's 20 minutes long, and I encourage you all to get some popcorn and watch the video. Click on the YouTube address and it'll automatically open for you. Let's look at another example. The Business Impact Assessment from CMS, which is the Center for Medical Services in the States. We download and print the document. Click on this highlight, Business Impact Assessment tool. It's in the readings too. And it is an interesting matrix format that has the respondent answer questions and formulate strategies for the business contingency plan. There are 3 basic matrices, and as you complete those, you end up with an overview of what the strategies will be for a business contingency plan. It looks simple, but by the time you're finished, you'll find there'll be volumes of information exposed during the whole process. The matrix format that has the respondent answer questions has 5 basic steps. First of all, you list the functions of the department. You, using the matrix provided, respond to specific questions in 5 categories: people, premises, processes, providers, and profile. Using another matrix, describe how the functions process is resilient to the crisis in 5 categories. You summarize the matrix into a list of key requirements, and then you document how these requirements can be achieved in the business continuity plan. Let's have a look at this in a little more detail. You can see the first page here. It's asking you, number 1, to list the organization's key functions in priority order. So which is the most important thing coming out of your front desk operations? It's probably check in, maybe check out. Okay. Individuals will have feelings about what will be the most important. Okay. And then you're using a guide set out below that in order to be able to undertake a business impact analysis of the department. This is a summary process that, in my opinion, should be executed prior to any detailed drill-down BIA investigation like the previous Loyola example. First, it is organized that you use a matrix with the headings listed with those 5 categories. And then you list the processes that are the mandate of the department and then describe the existing characteristics and ability to respond to any crisis. With this vision, the gathering of the information is used to describe that impact. The first matrix sets up the stage for the analysis to understand the existing characteristics of the department. Okay, under these 5 areas. First of all, people. You're going to be looking at what staff is required for key functions. List their skills, expertise, and training required. What are the minimum staffing levels required to perform a service if there is an interruption? So you're getting a picture of what the staffing is all about in your organization, in your department. The next one, of course, is the premises. You need descriptions of the building facility, alternative sites that might exist. What facilities are essential? What equipment and resources are absolutely needed? So again, you're getting and gathering more information about what you absolutely need in case of an emergency. Let look at process. IT is a critical element. Okay. Um, List the IT functions that are needed. What documentations and records are key and essential to your operation you can't live without? Where are they stored? Are they safely stored? Okay. What sort of systems and communications and means of communications are required to carry out your key functions? All part and parcel of gathering information about what's going on in this department. Providers, we're talking suppliers in this case. Okay. Uh, do you have any reciprocal agreements with other people? Do you tender key services out? That could be a weakness because they could suddenly say, hey, we don't want to do this business anymore, and you're left without it. Who and what are these keyed out services, key suppliers? Who are the suppliers who are essential and whom do you absolutely depend on? Okay. And then you have a listing of the profiles. Who are your key stakeholders? What are your legal considerations, your statutory and regulatory requirements? Vulnerable groups. Which vulnerable groups might be affected if your organization fails to carry out those key crises? Okay, so you see the questions strengthen and broaden the understanding of the organization as a whole. The next matrix forces the respondents to consider the concepts that will benefit you in case of an incident. Again, in the 5 categories. Looking at people, can staff be contacted off hours? Can extra capacity be built in the system to help in a crisis? Could staff be cross-trained? What is the minimum staffing level that is required? What measures can be taken to minimize the impacts of staff shortfalls? In terms of the premise, the location, can you relocate the operation? Are alternative facilities available in the event of a crisis? Would alternative equipment be available? It's fine to have another room, but do you have the computers you need, etc.? Processes. IT is critical. Is data backed up? Is it off-site? Is essential documentation stored securely in both fireproof and backed up? Are there alternative systems available? The providers. Are there agreements with other organizations with respect to staffing and facilities? Are you reliant on a single contractor? Are there alternatives? Could key suppliers be contacted in an emergency? Are they capable, reliable, and dependable in an emergency? Again, critical questions that you've got to know about who your suppliers are and how they're going to respond to helping you in terms of an emergency. And of course, in terms of profile, you're looking about reputation damage. How could you suffer from a reputation damage? Where are you going to have the most exposure? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be a lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera? Are staff trained to manage reputational damage? Do you have a system to log decisions, actions, and costs in a crisis? So, if you look at all that, you're really looking at an overview of all the questions that should be answered in a particular incident for this company in terms of how they're going to respond to a crisis situation. Okay. So on the first matrix, we were looking at what the existing situation is like. In this matrix, we're looking at how resilient they are to a crisis situation. In the next matrix, what we're doing now is identifying the requirements for continuing your key functions. So you'll notice that again, we have people, premises, process, providers, and profiles down on the left column. But in the second column, we're really giving all that information that will show your requirements for continuing if there is a disaster. It's going to list the key staff you need. It's going to list their key skills they need, the expertise they need. What are the important facilities, the key equipment? What's the security? Okay, what alternative sites are available? In terms of processes, you're going to have to be very aware of what IT systems are absolutely required. Is there documentation that you need? In terms of suppliers or providers, what key dependencies do you have? Do you have mechanical companies that can come on within the hour in order to be able to solve a problem? Okay. What record keeping requirements do you have? The key communication requirements. Okay. Okay, and the last one, of course, profiles, key stakeholders. What are your legal, statutory, regulatory, etc. So when you look at these things, you start recognizing that the requirement for continuing the key operations are going to be fairly detailed. Okay. The second part of this matrix is really there to be able to allow you to list how all the requirements will be achieved. It's looking at things like, is the management structure ideal for dealing with an incident? Okay. Multi-skill training in key areas so that you can cross-train people. Is there reciprocal agreements to cover the staffing shortfalls? If you're looking at premises, you're looking at relocation arrangements, inventory of equipment, etc. Salvage, site clearance, and cleaning arrangements that have to be made. In terms of processes, action cards for recovery of key processes. Are there copies and backups and safe storage facilities available? Documentation manual procedures all prepared so that people know what they're supposed to be doing. Is there data recovery procedures? Of course, for the providers, the suppliers, you're looking at alternative suppliers, alternative contractors, resilience in terms of the capacity of the suppliers and providers. Do you have a contractor that can come and fix the flooding pipe that is broken in the basement? Okay, can they be there within the hour? Okay. In terms of profile, you're looking at communication strategies, media liaison, public information advice, and notification of risk groups, and this sort of thing. So all these are part and parcel. And you look at the way this works, of course, if you go across the row, you're going to end up identifying the key areas of people and then developing strategies all about personnel that will help you in that contingency plan. So notice that there's no evaluation of the RTO or the RPO or financial losses or maximum tolerable period of disruptions. And these metrics should probably be part of the analysis, yielding a more tangible perspective of the impact. Okay, a basic summary. BIA is a process. There is no exact defined process to follow. The data analysis is subjective and logical. Each company and management group will define their own process, and the end result is that a BIA predicts the consequences of disruption of a business function and process, and thereby gathers information needed to develop the recovery strategies. Let's face it, a complete BIA is beyond the ability of one person to complete in the time given for this project. So the BIA portion of the project will simply be the summary version as explained in the latter example, the CMS example. Feel free to alter the matrix titles and questions to better fit your topic for the business continuity plan. There has to be 2 matrix detailing the description of the process and the existing ability to overcome the crisis. Then a summary of the requirements to continue the key functions and strategies suggested for the business continuity plan. Okay, I hope this works for you. Thanks very much.